Welcome to This Week in Morgan County. I'm your host, Russell Mokhiber. Our guest this week is Judge Debra McLaughlin. Judge, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Russell.
Most people know you as the prosecutor in Morgan County. You were prosecutor for 18 years.
That's correct.
How did you become a judge?
I simply applied for the job along with, I think, 10 other folks, and the governor selected me. Had a little support from Charles Trump in getting selected. And I've been doing this. I was appointed in August and have been serving as a circuit court judge since September.
And this is the 23rd Circuit.
23rd Judicial Circuit.
Judicial Circuit, which covers Morgan, Jefferson, and Berkeley.
That's correct.
And why was there an opening?
Judge Yoder passed away, unfortunately. He had gone in for some routine heart surgery, and unfortunately, complications happened.
And then you're facing your first election. This is the first time you've run for office, correct?
For judge.
For
correct.
judge, because you ran for prosecutor, and that was an elected position.
Correct. I went through 3 or 4 different elections as a prosecutor, but that would have been just in Morgan County. So this is the first time I'll do 3 counties. It's
3 counties.
200,000 people.
One
of the biggest territories. Really.
How many judges are there in the 23rd Circuit?
There's 6 judges in the 23rd Judicial Circuit. Now, right now, there is another vacancy, and that was due to Judge Silver retiring. So I was appointed to replace Judge Yoder, and Judge Silver's position, there's currently some applications in front of the governor now for an appointment. There's currently 3 people running in that seat, and so folks will actually be electing 2 circuit court judges again during this election.
And they will be electing them on primary day, May 8th.
That's correct.
So even though it's a primary for all other races, for these 2 races, this will be an election.
That's correct. It's kind of like your school board races. Because they're nonpartisan, the election is done during the primary.
And you will be facing in this election, just so our listeners know, you will be facing an attorney from the Eastern Panhandle, David Hammer, and we will be interviewing him later.
That's correct.
That's in this race. And in the other race, there are 3 other candidates, which we hope to interview also. Why did you want to be a judge after being a prosecutor?
Well, when I first decided to go to law school, I was motivated by wanting to be a juvenile court judge. Now, my experience had been as a probation officer. I had been interning one summer trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. I was in school for psychology and sociology with concentration in criminal justice, and I was trying to figure out, do I go for a doctorate? Do I go to law school? What do I want to do? And I was a juvenile probation officer one summer, and I've realized that the impact on juveniles, at the time, I thought I was seeing it from the judge, and that's kind of what motivated me for wanting to go to law school. When I came out of law school, I found myself doing civil law. I was 5 years in Pennsylvania, between Philadelphia and York, Pennsylvania, and never found a career path into the criminal world of law until I moved to Morgan County.
What brought you to Morgan County?
Believe it or not, my husband had just finished his residency. He was a general surgeon in Pennsylvania. He had finished his residency, so was looking for a career. Dr. Corantello had had some health issues, and our local hospital was looking for somebody to come in and be a general surgeon in Morgan County. And that's what brought us here.
You came with your husband. Your husband now works at War Memorial?
That's correct. He's actually now an emergency room physician. At the time, I would say I could date everything but my children, because when we interviewed to come here to Morgan County, my son had just been born. And when I became the assistant prosecutor, I was pregnant with my 2nd child. When I became the elected prosecutor, I was pregnant with my 3rd child. So
when you came here, though, you didn't start as a prosecutor. You started in private practice?
I did. It was very short-lived, but I did start at Hermison and Sebastian, a law firm. Worked there kind of full-time, but then shortly after joining them, we lost our assistant prosecutor. He joined the public defender's office, and David Sebastian asked me to become the part-time assistant prosecutor. So I had kind of like a family law practice going on, some general civil law going on, and then worked in magistrate court as well as doing abuse and neglect cases in circuit court when I first started out. And then in 2002, I became the elected prosecutor.
How many times did you have to run for re-election? What's the term for the prosecutor?
Prosecutors have a 4-year term as opposed to circuit court judges that have an 8-year term. So I actually ran, following an appointment in 2002, I ran for the unexpired term there. And then it would have been 2004, 8, 12, and 16. And
then this opening happened. Did that come about? No, you thanked Charlie Trump. Was Charlie Trump the one who recommended you to the judge? Or?
So you go down to Charleston and you first interview. So because there were 11 applicants, the interview process involves a panel of 15 people, give or take, who interview everybody, examine the applications, the background, the history of the folks, and recommend anywhere between 2 to 5 names to go to the governor. The governor then chooses who he wants to appoint. Mm-hmm. Of course, he looks to the attorneys in the community to see who the community is going to support, who is going to be somebody that will be a good circuit court judge.
And how long have you been a judge now? How long have you been sitting?
I can't remember the exact day in September. I think it was September 20th. Okay. But I began in September. And shortly after beginning as a judge, we lost Judge Silver as well due to his early retirement, and I found myself having to be responsible for 2 judges' dockets. That put me both in Berkeley County and Jefferson County, handling civil and criminal cases in Berkeley County that would otherwise have been Judge Silver's cases, and handling the criminal and civil cases in Jefferson County that would otherwise have been Judge Yoder's. And then on top of that, being responsible for drug court in Jefferson County.
What are the salaries for prosecutor versus judge?
Salaries for prosecutors all depend upon the jurisdiction size.
Well, let's say here, so, what were you being paid when you jumped from one to the other? What's the difference? Because it's public record.
Right, roughly it's about a $20,000 increase.
Okay. And you're running against David Hammer, who's a private attorney.
I always say he's running against me because it's my seat.
Okay. All right, that's so what's your campaign like? Why are you saying you're the better candidate than David Hammer?
Mostly because of my experience in the world of criminal law. Much of a judge's responsibility really is in the courtroom work is the criminal work, the abuse and neglect, the juveniles, the felonies. That takes up courtroom time astronomically.
75%?
At least.
70, is it 70-30 criminal civil, or what is it?
If you compared the number of cases, you wouldn't see that same percentage, but what time is spent in the courtroom is spent on those criminal abuse, neglects, and juvenile cases. Civil cases are handled, for the most part, back in the office. They're the summary judgment motions. They're the motions to compel disputes over some minor issues related to discovery. You'll have short hearings to allow attorneys to further argue their case, but they've briefed it, they've submitted memos of law, they'll submit proposed orders. So much of a judge's work on civil cases are done kind of behind the courtroom at the office.
From your experience as a judge, what are the major criminal cases that you're facing?
Well, they're the same as I had as a prosecutor, believe it or not. Only I've always said Morgan County has the same types of cases as Berkeley and Jefferson, only we have them in lesser numbers. So we might have had 1 murder every 4 years. In Berkeley or Jefferson, unfortunately, they're having murders, I'm not sure what their numbers are, but to a greater extent than Morgan County sees them. Robberies are, it shocks me as to how many robbery cases, correct.
Are you sitting in Berkeley County?
I am.
So that means you're hearing just Berkeley County cases?
When I'm in Berkeley County. So I have a docket in Jefferson, I have a docket in Berkeley. So on Mondays I run usually back and forth. I'll have a Berkeley County docket in the morning and I'll have a Jefferson County docket in the afternoon.
But if you're elected to this seat, where will you sit? And who decides that?
So what happens is the judges come together. So all 6 judges sit around the table, we look at the cases, We look and see what the numbers are, and then we look and see where the courtroom space is, and you decide who's going to sit where. So we have 2 new judges that just began in the beginning of 2017, and they were assigned the abuse and neglect cases in Jefferson and Berkeley, as well as in Morgan. Judge Faircloth got assigned to Morgan County, and Judge Cohey got assigned to cover between Berkeley and Jefferson counties. So once you get 2 new judges in as a result of May's election, all of those cases will be put back on the table again, and the judges will decide how they want to divide them. Are any of the judges ready to have a new caseload? And is there an easier or a better way to divide equally the cases? And Judge Wilkes doesn't serve on criminal cases in Berkeley County because his daughter is the prosecutor in Berkeley County.
So he
right
recuses
now,
himself from those cases.
Correct. So right now, Judge Lawrenson, myself, Judge Cohey, and Judge Faircloth are handling the felonies in Berkeley County. And then Judge Cohey and myself split the felonies in Jefferson County.
Is there a chance you would sit in Morgan County and hear just Morgan County cases?
I would hope that given time, and it would probably be for about a year, that I would be able to sit in Morgan County. Not until the majority of the cases that I was responsible for indicting or had some input into their investigation working with the police are out of Morgan County can I serve Morgan County. So the judge that serves Morgan County is a half a judge position. So
you would do half-time here and half-time maybe Berkeley County?
Either Berkeley or Jefferson. I would think it might be a Jefferson County because the number-wise, it's almost as if you would have 1.5 judges in Jefferson, 4 judges in Berkeley, and a half a judge in Morgan. Unless those numbers change, and every year you look at the numbers and you see how many filings there are in civil cases, criminal cases, abuse and neglects.
Because this show's called This Week in Morgan County, let's do a little Morgan County criminal law.
Sure.
And from your experience as a prosecutor and what you know about the cases currently being brought here, what are our criminal law problems here? Are they mostly drug? If you give me some percentages.
They are. You know, I've heard kind of all kinds of percentages. The reality is that crimes are motivated in some part or affected in some part by drugs. Mostly opiates, but sometimes it's alcohol, sometimes it's opiates, sometimes it's marijuana. You name it across the board, it's affected by drugs. Most robberies, burglaries, break-ins, it's people wanting to steal money. They take it, they pawn the items for money to support their drug habits. They're selling drugs to support their drug habits. So coming up with a solution to the drug problem isn't a new problem. It's highlighted right now because of the number of deaths that we're seeing from opiate overdoses. That's what's new. The crimes have always been affected or motivated by drug usage. But what we're seeing now is the deaths, and that's why you have the attention.
Yes, and national news even focused on Morgan County, mostly Berkeley County, but also we see stories reporting from Berkeley Springs about the problem. What can be done about it?
So one of the things is the drug court. Drug courts have been around only for 2.5, 3 years in the Eastern Panhandle. Originally, they passed legislation that required every circuit to have at least one drug court. At this point in time, we're running 2 drug courts, one out of Berkeley County, one out of Jefferson County. Morgan County does not actively have a drug court. They could utilize the drug court in either Berkeley or Jefferson County, but the defendant, probationer, would have to go to those counties to receive services. Until,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I was going to say, until we get a day report center or until we have some type of a treatment program here in Morgan County, that's what it takes to be able to then create a drug court in Morgan County. You have to have the treatment to go with the court oversight. The best way to describe drug court is it's probation on steroids. You are intensifying the supervision for these folks, the accountability. So they come and they're getting, through a plea, maybe a recommendation of probation. But typically they're not somebody who would normally be considered for probation. But when we look at their criminal history, we see that they're not committing violent offenses, they're committing property crimes. And when they're committing property crimes, they're getting in this cycle where they break into a house, they get put on probation, they don't survive probation, they get revoked, they go to the penitentiary, they come out of the penitentiary, and within 6 months, they're breaking into another house because they went right back to using drugs. They're not getting the drug treatment, or they're not learning enough from the drug treatment in the penitentiary system. So the question became, what can we do as part of probation to make it so that people are successful? And what we've done is we've learned from treatment programs that you can't always expect success from every drug user. There's going to be relapses. I can go 3 months and be clean, but then it might be that I have a relapse. The question is what do you do about that relapse? Because drug court requires the individual to be drug tested 3 times a week throughout the entire length of drug court. So that's a minimum of 1 year because it takes 4 months to get through each phase. There's 3 phases. So the minimum amount of time that somebody's going to be in drug court is 1 year. The reality is these people are going to struggle. And because they're struggling, it's going to take more than a year to get through drug court.
We watched this is a movie made in West Virginia, Heroin. Did you get to see it?
I have.
And we watched it just last week. And it's called Heroin, E, because it's about 3 women in West Virginia who are fighting the drug battle. I think it was in Huntington.
Correct.
And one of them was a drug court judge. And now
she was actually a family court judge, I think, is what she was, and she volunteered to serve on drug court because it takes a judge to volunteer their time to do that.
To do that. And so is that how it works in the Eastern Panhandle? Also a superior court judge volunteering for drug court?
Both of our drug courts are overseen by a circuit court judge at this point in time.
Yes.
So that's myself and Judge Lawrenson. Where we are short-staffed is in the probation officer. In order to supervise somebody on drug court, you have to have a probation officer supervising them. Because the supervision is so intensive, individuals have to call their probation officer every night they're given a 2-hour window to check in. They're expected to go and do home visits to see what's going on in the home. They are meeting with the folks through the treatment service at least 3 times a week. They have to go, if they don't have jobs, we require them to do AA/NA meetings daily. If they have jobs, we might cut that back to 3 times a week. They're doing drug testing 3 times a week. So it's very intensive. So the most a probation officer can have in terms of the number of people on drug court is 20. Unfortunately, we have 1 probation officer for both Berkeley and Jefferson counties.
So we need more. Just a couple final questions real quick because we just have a couple minutes. One is, you have to raise money for this campaign. Your opponent says he's not going to take any outside money, just spend his own money, but you're actively raising money from the community, and I'm wondering, what's your answer to that?
Well, it's a funny thing because as a trial court judge, my job is to follow rules, okay? And when they decided to make judges a nonpartisan position, and really even I think prior to that, they set up a set of rules for how a judge can go about raising money because it is an elected position. So the question is, do you want just an attorney that's out there in the private sector who has a huge pot of money that they can draw from, a business that they can run advertising through? Because if you do your business advertising, that doesn't count towards your campaign funds. So they've set up a set of rules.
That's true, and we hear his ads on local radio. Yes.
Sure. We have these rules, and it requires us to do a committee. And I myself cannot ask a single person for any money, and nor do I ask a single person for money.
But your committee does.
The committee does that.
Okay.
The committee tracks the money that comes in. The committee reports it to the state, and there's an accounting of it. In my mind, I believe that there is just as much risk of there being some type of a bias or prejudice amongst attorneys and judges if I walk up to you as the candidate and say, I support you, what can I do to help you? How is that any different than my saying, I want to give you $25?
You mean a volunteer effort?
That's
something
right.
like that. Okay.
So people are influenced, obviously, by those that support them. The question is as a judge, are you able to set those things aside? Are we able to trust you not to look at who has donated money to your campaign? Are we able to trust you not to go to the Secretary of State's office and look at those donations, and to be a judge, to be fair and impartial? And I believe that my years of service as a prosecutor shows that I have a track record of being fair and impartial in choosing what cases get prosecuted, how they get prosecuted. Election
May 8th. If people want more information about your campaign, where do they go?
They go to judgemclaughlin.com.
judgemclaughlin.com. Thank you very much
Thank you
for joining us. And thank you for watching This Week in Morgan County.